It reminds me of another book, Have a Little Faith. And I know you based it on, there's a story behind that. Can you share to the people what inspired you to write that book?
That was a story of a rabbi and a pastor. The rabbi was almost 90 years old. The pastor and had led a very, very pious life. And the pastor was an African-American man who had been in prison and had been a drug dealer and had nearly killed people. And I mean, just the worst life. And he gave his life over to Jesus when he was 30, when he thought he was going to be killed in a drug deal. And the next morning, he was alive, and he said, okay, I'm going to keep my promise, and he turned his life around, and he became a pastor in the inner city in Detroit in a church that has a hole in its roof, or had a hole in its roof, where the snow and the rain would literally come in on top of people who were praying. And most of the people praying were poor and homeless, and they couldn't afford to fix the roof. And I thought, when I saw that and I got to know him, I thought, wow, you know, that's faith. You know, you're praying in the rain and there's a hole over you. And he and the rabbi who had asked me to write his eulogy they were so different looking, and they were from such different parts of the world and different religions, but they were really the same. You know, they were united by this amazing belief. So I wrote this book about the two of them and how I moved between the two of them and learned from both of them, you know, and how similar they ended up being. And the rabbi died when he was 91, and I delivered his eulogy. And then, unfortunately, Henry, the pastor, died a couple years later when he was 51, and I delivered his eulogy.
I know you did some charity work, you just mentioned, and now you have a charity, include a medical clinic for homeless children and in Haiti, in Port-au-Prince, in Haiti. Tell us about that.
Well, those are two different things, actually. I have a medical clinic for homeless children in Detroit because there's a terrible problem with homeless children in Detroit not getting medical care. So we opened a clinic that doesn't ask any questions and doesn't threaten to take the children away, which is what happens at hospitals in America. If your kids are homeless and you bring them in, you're homeless, even though you're keeping your kids, they'll take your kids away from you. So consequently, most homeless families don't bring their children in for medical care because they don't want to lose their children.
Right.
But meanwhile, the kid can't get any medical treatment. So we opened a clinic that just takes care of kids like that without any questions and all that.
Okay.
So that's in Detroit.
Okay.
And then in Haiti, after the earthquake, I went down there with a few friends, and we got involved with an orphanage down there that we thought we would just sort of help rebuild because it had really been, it wasn't in very good shape to begin with, and it had been damaged some in the earthquake. And we built the first toilets and the first showers and the first kitchen and a school, and over time it just became so dear to us that and they had no money to operate, so we ended up taking it over, and I've been operating it ever since. That was in 2010, so this is 4 years now that I go to Haiti every month. And I go
every month?
Yeah, every month.
Wow.
3 days or 4 days, and just to administer and to admit new children. And now the kids are doing great, and it's an amazing thing to see, you know, children who were brought to you skinny and malnourished and with terrible skin problems and so shy and scared that their head was always in their chest and they didn't speak a word of anything. And, you know, they were living in a tent in mud, sharing water with animals, no bathrooms, you know, 6 or 7 people in a single tent, 1 cup of rice a day, no education. And now, you know, we brought them in, and they have beds, they have dormitories, they have 3 meals a day, they have a school that they go to 6 days a week. And when I come every month and I get out of the car, they come running up to me and they say, Mr. Mitch, Mr. Mitch, and they tell me about what they learned in school, and they tell me about neutrons and protons and the solar system, and it's just, it's an amazing thing to see the transformation of a life. And to know that you had a small part in altering that. And so it's really one of the most precious things that I have in my life, and the most important thing I do, far more important than any of my books or anything like that. And it's one of the reasons that I wanted to come here to the Philippines after the typhoon, because I'm familiar with disasters and what they can do to an area, and I wanted to see if I could be some help here.
Yes, you did mention that this is your first time in the Philippines, and you've been invited a couple of times before, but this is really the first time that that you came, and
Right.
one of the big reasons is because you wanted to see what happened in, or what situation right now is in Tacloban.
Right. Not just see it, but see if I can help it and use my notoriety. If I'm really known here, as people keep telling me, well then, all right, maybe I can help draw some attention to the situation there. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going up there. We've already arranged to donate 40 boats, for fishing and all that. And I guess each boat is going to have the name of one of my books on it or something. But more importantly, we're pledging to rebuild 10 libraries there at the schools. And not only to help to raise the money to rebuild them, but to populate them with books. I'm going to bring up hundreds of my books to start it, but then I also asked a bunch of my friends in America if they would participate too and pledge at least 10 personal books that they would send themselves, maybe sign them or something like that, to be read, not to be sold, to be read by the kids there. And so far, let's see, Stephen King and Nicholas Sparks and Khaled Hosseini and Amy Tan and John Grisham and just a bunch more of I think pretty well-known authors. Everyone I called said, yeah, count me in, count me in. So when I go up there, I'll have a book from every one of these authors to represent it, and our goal is to try to get some sense of normalcy, at least in the library world, back to that area. Because I know from Haiti, the most important thing is to reconstruct life, not just to, get by, not just to, all right, you're starving, here's some bread. You need some shelter, here's a little bit of a roof, but to rebuild life, as it actually existed. And I have to imagine that there's very little to do right now up there because so many people have left. So what could be better in some ways than books that give you an escape and give kids something, like hours of pleasure to read and hope and dream, as the area around them builds up. So that's my hope. And I don't kid myself that I'm going to make some huge difference, but if I can do this much good, then it's certainly worth the trip over here.
Oh, truly, it will make a big difference just for them to see you visit. You'll see the smile in their faces, and you'll see how much you've affected their lives. Thank you, and thank you for to continue touching lives and with all your books and inspiring people with all your books.
Well, you're kind to say that. Thank you.
Thanks again. That was Mitch Albom.